Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Hi. Okay, let's get started here. Okay, so I think we were in a bit Yosef. I'll continue here. It says, "V'katu other Tosfot." It says Tosfot furthermore. Per kol sha'a. Omer Rabbeinu Tam says Rabbeinu Tam Dafka beliloto raka. That's only if we had low concentration of flour to water, or lower ratio. Pligid Rabbi Yochanan regarding that they argue. The Rabbi Yochanan holds afiato beilfas oseu lechem. Rabbi Yochanan says when you make an ilfas, which is that special pot that we talked about, that makes it into bread. Therefore, it has to be taken also challah there. Resh Lakish holds and oseu lechem, that it doesn't make it into bread just because you made it into that pot. upatur, that therefore it's absolved from chala. Aval belilato ava kule alma modu. But he says when it comes to something which has higher ratio of flour, everybody admits the chayav bechala, it has to be taken chala there. Afilu alide mashke, even if it's made in liquid, because the obligation of chala comes from already the time that you made it into a dough. Like it's brought down in several places. It says, that's the way it implies, he says, that from what you learned in Masechet Chala in Mishnah, Techilato Sufkanin V'Safo Isa, if the beginning, right, in the beginning it's Sufkanin, and then in the end it's Isa, Techilato Isa V'Safo Sufkanin, Chayav B'Chala. So in other words, we're trying to say that if it was made in two ways, right, which is boiling and baking, so then it's going to be hamotzi, it's going to be bread. And it's going to be obligated to take bread from chala from there. And Rabbeinu Tam says also he blessed hamotzi on that. He brings a source from Menachot Ayin Hey Amud Bet, also there in this. In Brachot Yaminan Haya Omed Umakriv Mincha B'Yerushalayim. If he was standing and bringing a meal offering in Jerusalem, Omer Shechianu, he says Shechianu Natno Leochlo. If he took it to eat it, Omer Hamotzi, and he's going to eat bless Hamotzi. V'ka Basik V'tane Kol Amenachot V'afilu Minchat Mechabat. So it says you see from there that it teaches that every meal offering, even if it's in a pan, marcheshet, depan, apapi shemetugnet b'shemen, even though it's fried in oil, ve'en svara lechalek ben mayim l'shemen. So he says there's no logic to differentiate between oil and water. Aval al virmizilo shekorin alitria. היה אומר רבנו תם שאין מברכים מוציא שאין בהם תוריתא דנהמה, right? So I think he's talking here about pasta. So the question is like this, right? That what is the blessing for pasta? So you may have thought to say, well, it's wheat, it's basically a dough, so then we should make hamotzi. But comes and tells you, Rabbeinu Tam, not so. Why is that? Because it doesn't look like bread. Pasta doesn't look like bread. It doesn't have the same texture or shape. So therefore, it doesn't have the same blessing either. So it says even though the dough was obligated in chala, even though it was, so it says over there that you make mezonot on that, just like we do, right, on pasta. And then you make al michya at the end. ודברים אלו כתבום לראש, it says it's written in ראש, בענן also במרדכי, בשם רבינו תם, in the name of רבינו תם. והגאות בפרק ג' בהלכות ברכות בשם סמ"ג, also these rabbis בסמ"ג, וגם רבינו יונה כתב דברים אלו, פרק כיצד מברכין, וכן כתב רבינו שמשון בפרק כמה במסכת חלה, וזה לשונו, משמע נמי דברכת המוציא תלויה בחלה, בכל דבר שבלילתו קשה. So he also says, right, like this, that the issue of making hamotzi depends on if it's obligated in challah or not, the dough. So whatever you have, where there's a lot of high flour ratio, even though he cooked it in water or whatever, or in some liquid, but nevertheless, right, we say that that's going to be a hamotzi anyway. So therefore you have to wash your hands as well. He says birkat hamazon and also birkat hamazon. Also he says in the beginning when you made it there was a low flour ratio when you made it by way of a fire, without any liquid. And then it was done in the oven. על ידי משקה, and there was also liquid there, אלא שאחר כך כתב, but afterwards he writes that since we said פרק כיצד מברכים, גבי לחם עשוי לקותח, regarding bread that was made to make kotach out of it, which is some kind of a dip. משמע שהלש יישא גמורה ודעתו לבשלה, so it comes out from there that implies that if you have a dough and the intention is to cook it with water, or לתגנה בשמן, or to cook it or to fry it in oil, פטורה מן החלה, so it's exempt from חלה, והד ימינן, and that which we said, בפרק כיצד מברכים, this פרק, דאוכל מנחה מברך המוציא. A person who eats a meal offering, he blesses המוציא, לה במנחת ומחבת מרחשת דיילה. It's not talking about when you're making a pan, מתוגנת בשמן ובטלה מתורת הלחם. So it says because when you make it fried in oil and it doesn't have anymore the appearance of bread, אלא בדסולת או במאפה תנור. So it says talking about when you bake in the oven, אלא מבכל המנחות בשמנן תמורת. So it says if you have little oil in them in these meal offerings, מועט ואין בו כדי לבטלו, and there's not enough there to nullify it. וכן כתב הר"ן פרק כל השעה בשם הרמב"ן. These rabbis also wrote this, ותחיל תנן תחילתה יישא וסופה סופגנין. So that which we said that the beginning it's like a dough and then it turns out to be like a some kind of a donut or something like that, סופגנין, חייבת בחילה בחלה, it's obligated in חלה, והיינו שעשה מתחילה על דת לחם. So what does that mean? Beginning he made it for bread, the בחייה גבנה הוא דמחייבה בגלגול. So then he says, ואף על פי שנמלך לעשותה בסופגנין, and even though in the end, right, he's changed his mind to make it into like a donut, לא פקח חיובה מיניה, it doesn't absolve it from its obligation of חלה. אבל כל שעשה מתחילה על דת סופגנין, but if he made it beginning to be like a donut, and פלפי שבלילתה קשה, even though it's very thick ratio, high ratio flour, ועיקר גלגול לא מחייבה, it's still not going to be obligated, וכן נראה מדברי הרמב"ם פרק ו' מלכות חלה, that's the way it comes out from Rambam. He says, "Miu Rabbeinu Shimshon katav b'perek kama dechala b'shem Yerushalmi." But Rabbeinu Shimshon says in the name of the Yerushalmi, "Shafilu kisheoseh ota al dat lebashla." Even if he makes it to cook it, im natal mina isa me'at de'afota. If he took some of it from the dough, oil from the dough, some of the dough, to bake it be'or in the oven, chayavet kol isa b'chala. So then the whole dough is obligated to do tikhala. The chayshin shema timalech likach keshiur chala. This is because we're concerned that he'll change his mind to take the size of chala. V'chem katav rosh. That's what it says in the Rosh Perek Kol Sha'ah. V'ilchot chala in these places. V'Rabbeinu Yerucham katav sheRabbeinu Shimshon v'Ramban. This rabbi says that these rabbis savrim shafilu belilato ava, that even if there's a high ratio of flour, in bishla or tigna, if he cooked it or fried it, and mevarchin alei motzi, no bless motzi, vafilu nitchayeva bechala, even though it's obligated in chala, vafilu sheyesh alei torita and even if it looks like bread. Delot dame birkat motzi lechala. Because he says the blessing of Hamotzi and Chala are two different things. The Chala, Batar, Gilgula, Isa is Dinan. Because when it comes to Chala, we're talking about that you made it into a dough. About Birkat Hamotzi, but when it comes to Hamotzi, Hakol Olech Achar Shat Afiyat, it goes according to the baking. But Tchilat Isa, Sofat Sufganin, or Ivcha, or Sofat Sufganin, or Berachin Aleh, and Merachin Aleh Hamotzi, whenever one bless Hamotzi, he says on things which are not totally made as bread. ואם סופה יישא, כלומר שנאפה בלא בבישול, במים, בלא בטיגון, so, but he says if the end was going to be baked and not fried, מברך עליה המוציא, then we do המוציא, וכן יהיה עיקר כנשנו, וכן הוא דעת רבנו יונה. So says רבנו, says the Red Yosef, רבנו יונה also holds this way, פרק כיצד מברכים, שאם הייתה בלילתו עבה, if it was right, high flour ratio flour, ואחר כך רקחו על ידי משקין, but then there was added some liquids there. חייב בחלה, it made softer. אצלה במחלה שכיוון שכבר הייתה המלילה הבאה, because since they made the hard flour ratio באותה שעה, נתחייב בחלה. It was already obligated in חלה. שחיוב החלה תלוי בגלגול, because he says the obligation of חלה is regarding, it's obligated by way of the making the dough, אבל אין מברכין עליו המוציא, but we don't bless המוציא, שברכת המוציא תלויה בלחם, because he says the issue of המוציא depends on if it's bread, וזה כיוון שנתבטל מתורת לחם, but he says since this was not made as bread, אין מברכין עליו המוציא, we don't bless המוציא, ולא שלוש ברכות, and also not ברכת המזון. Okay, interesting. So this is a lot of description, and let me just maybe summarize this for you a little bit here. Yeah, we're almost finished, so we'll summarize in the end. Just give me a couple of more minutes here, we'll finish this off. So it goes on. So then he says, "Rosh katab divrei Rabbeinu Tam." The Rosh brought the words of Rabbeinu Tam, but divrei Rabbeinu Shimshon, and also Rabbeinu Shimshon perek kol shah. In this perek of kol shah, bechol lo yichri, I didn't pass in the halacha. Ela dehevi divrei Rabbeinu Shimshon b'achrona. So he says, but since he brought the words of Rabbeinu Shimshon in the end, mashma dekivateh svir, it implies that he holds like him. V'chen dat Rabbeinu. Also, he says Rabbeinu also holds this way. Shkata b'sefer Yodea, because he writes in Yodea, maskanat harosh, the conclusion of the Rosh Kedivei Arash is like the Rash. B'shachin dat Rambam, also Rambam holds this way. V'kama sheyesh litmoa lama stam Satam Khan Divarav Kedat Rabbeinu. Why did he hear Paskin like Rabbeinu Tam? Kivan Sharosh Rambam Savre Kirash, since the Rosh and Rambam hold like the Rosh. But died the Hachi Naktinan. That's the way we should paskin. Veimken kidvarav haya lo listom. So therefore, you should paskin that way. He says here as well. Vagot maimoniot katuv pepet gimel milchot berachot. Says this rabbi b'shem laws of blessings b'shem asamag, the name of the rabbi. Shedibrei Rabbeinu Shimshon nir'in dochak gadol. So he says the words of Rabbeinu Shimshon seem to be very forced. Udvarav nir'im b'mushalim b'mayim. So that seems right when you cook it in water. Aval metuganim b'chabat. But if you boil it in, if you fry it in oil in the pan, shem ela mi'at sham ela mi'at shamen. There's only a little bit of oil there. So he says the proper thing is like the first opinion, which is with make hamotzi on that. And also obligated chala. Katav Rosh Perkal Kol Shal Bichot Chala. Says the Rosh. Rabbeinu Tam haya noheg keshelashin isa bebeto. So he says the custom of Rabbeinu Tam was like this: when they're making a dough in his house, in order to cook it with water and to boil it, whatever, or the tagna, or to fry it b'shemen in oil, hayam mitzavel lafot mimenu me'at. He would tell them like this, to bake a little bit from a little bit of it. So then what happens is that because of that, the whole dough becomes obligated in challah. וגם לא היה אוכל בלא המוציא. Also, he wouldn't eat without המוציא. אחר שנתבשלה, after it was cooked, or נתגנה, or it was fried. וגם לא היה מברך עליו המוציא, אלא מברך על לחם אחר. So he also wouldn't do hamotzi on that, and rather what we do is bless on different bread, that he had, and eat that together with it. כתוב רבנו בספר יהודיה, and the Torah brings us down יהודיה, סימן ש"כ"ט in chapter 329, ושם ביארתי טעמו, so he says there I explained his reasoning, וכן ראוי לנהוג, so he said that's the proper way to, he says, be accustomed. וכן כתוב בהגות מימוניות, that's what it's written in המימוניות, פרק ג' למלכות ברכות, in the laws of blessings, בשם הסמך, נם הסמך. דירי שמיים יצא שניהם, ולא יאכלם אלא בתוך הסעודה. So he says the proper thing to do, since there's a machloket about it, is to eat these things within the seudah. So this way, right, you know for sure that you're doing the right thing. Why? Because you're eating bread together with it. So this way you do hamotzi, and then it always it fulfills the obligation of also this dough as well. So that's very interesting. So let's see how he sums it up in the Shulchan Aruch here. Let's see if we got everything here. Make sure we read everything. Okay, so that was Yud Gimel, right? So what are we talking about here, right? Let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we'll summarize everything. It's the best thing to do. Yeah, so it says like this. אפילו דבר שבלילתו אהבה, right? Even something which has a high flour ratio. So what does that mean, right? That you made it into a dough. Im bishla or tigna en mevarach aleh motzi, right? So what do we do? If he cooked it or fried it, we don't make hamotzi on that. Afilu sheyesh alea torita denahama, even though it looks like bread. Afilu nitchayeva bechala, even though it's obligated to take challah from there. The birkat hamotzi eno olech ela achar shat afiyah, because he says the hamotzi only goes after the baking, the blessing of hamotzi. Okay, and then he brings another opinion. Some say that if the beginning, the dough was made, right, as we said, right, high flour content of flour, high ratio of flour. So it looks like, like basically a challah dough. Even though afterwards he softened it with water, right? Right? So he made right, like some kind of donut kind of thing. Right? That's what we call, by the way, today, in Israel, the donuts, sufganiot, same kind of idea, right? Sufganin, sufgin, right? Sufgin. Sufganin, sufganiot, whatever. They're all, so why do they use this word sufgin, sufganiot? What does that mean, this word? So what it means is that it's absorbing oil, as you cook it, whatever, or right, something like that, or absorbing water, So it turns out to be a different texture there, a little bit, right? A little bit softer, than bread. And then he cooked it with water or tignan b'shaman or baked it with oil. So that's going to be hamotzi. So that's another opinion here. So he says the God-fearing person, what should he do? As we said in the end of the Beit Yosef, try to fulfill the opinion of both of them. So what does that mean? Eat them inside a meal. And you should first bless on regular bread, and then eat this in the meal together with it. So this way, you're right. You're getting out of the doubt of the blessing over here. So says Rama Haga, b'chol zem lo ma'ira ela b'deit b'yud leachar afiyah torah lechem. That's if it has the appearance of bread after the baking. Okay. Second. But if it doesn't have the appearance of bread, kagon lakshin, right? So lakshin is like that's what the Ashkenazim call pasta, right? Shekorin whatever. So for sure we don't bless hamotzi on pasta. ולא גימל ברכות, לא סדנת ברכת המזון, ולא מקרה לחם, it's not called bread at all, right? That's not bread. אבל פשטידה וקרפלח, but he says when it comes to פשטידה and קרפלח, right, which is מקרה תורה לחם, that's called like it looks like bread. So that's more like it has the appearance of bread more than pasta. So therefore, he says what you should do is bless on different bread and eat that together with it. So that's only talking about a dough which doesn't have oil or honey. Those are things like this. It's just right. It's fried in them. But im nilosh behen. But if he was kneaded with them, according to Dinosh, it's el pata babe kisnin. That was already explained regarding sweet bread. So okay, so let's go over this right. This itemize this whole thing from top to bottom. Make sure we got it. We understand everything. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry. So again, right, to reiterate, what did we just say? That if you are making a dough, okay, and it's like basically looks like challah dough, right? Like a regular dough, nice and thick. So he says, if you take that and cook it in water or fry it in oil, right, the blessing will not be hamotzi. Even though it looks like bread, and even though it's obligated to take challah from there. So let me just explain to you, right, a little bit more about this. For instance, let's say you're making pancakes, right? So, when you make pancakes, right, it's a high ratio of water, relatively speaking, right, than more than flour. And that's why, it's like a batter. It looks like a batter, right? It doesn't look like a dough when you're making pancakes. So that for sure is not going to be hamotzi because it's a batter. So when you fry that up in a pan, for sure the blessing is going to be mezonot. But here we're talking about that it's thicker, more, as we said, higher flour ratio. So it makes it into like a thick dough, like a challah dough. Like, you're making bread basically. It looks like bread, But the thing is, now we have a machloket regarding that. So the first opinion says if you boil it or fry it, right, even though it's a thick, nice dough, that will not be hamotzi. That's the first opinion. It's going to be mezonot. Even though it looks like bread. It does look like bread, but the problem is it wasn't baked. It was fried or boiled, right? So we have things like that today, right? Similar, like donuts, right? That would be a perfect example of that. Well, according to the first opinion, that would be mezonot. But then he brings another opinion. That what? That since it started out to be thick, like a challah dough, right? Even if afterwards you made it softer, by like, and you made it like donuts kind of thing, and you cooked it in water or baked it right, so fried it in oil, that would be hamotzi according to the second opinion. So the thing is, as we said in the Bet Yosef, we're not really sure here, which opinion is the halakha. So therefore, the proper thing to do is, to be stringent, like both opinions. How do you do that? So the way you do it is by taking some bread, right, making hamotzi, and eating it together with this stuff. So this way, for sure, right, that you fulfilled your obligation because you made hamotzi on real bread. But that's the side of chumrah, right? In other words, that's a stringency. We have to have also just a basic halacha, as well. Right? So the question is, if you don't want to be really machmir like this, not everybody likes to be machmir. So then, which is the halacha, the first opinion or second opinion? So the truth is, right, according to the structure here in the Shulchan Aruch, you see the halacha like the first opinion, no? So if you don't want to do this and be stringent, right, so what you're going to do is make mezonot on something like that. So therefore, right, if you're eating, as we said, right, donuts, right, whatever, things like this, or the things which are made like that, not baked, right? Either boiled or right fried. So what you're gonna do is right make on that according to the basic halacha. You're gonna make mezonot on that. If you want to be stringent, have it with some bread and make hamotzi. Um, so um, therefore, right, the custom is, for donuts we make mezonot. That's what we do. But the thing is, the Ramah here reminds you about something, right? Which is that uh, by our donuts, it's not exactly like this. Why is that? Because our donuts also have additional stuff in the dough there. They have sweetness, they have sugar, right, or honey or whatever. There's all kinds of stuff, oil, right, additional stuff. So we already said regarding sweet breads, that stuff like that. Anyways, mezonot. So therefore, that's another reason why our donuts, right, you're gonna make mezonot on that. It's never gonna be hamotzi, and you don't have to be stringent, to eat it with some bread, together. They don't need that. Regarding things like that. So here, what are we talking about? We're talking about something which doesn't have any sweetness to it. It's just a regular dough. There we say, it's proper to be stringent, eat it with bread together. And if you're not going to be stringent, okay, fine, then do mezonot on it. Okay, so let's move on into the Ramah. He also brings some important things here, right? As we brought in the Bit Yosef. Number one, right? The Ramah says, what about pasta, right? Well, that's also dough. Yeah, you're right. But it doesn't look like bread, So therefore, right, we already said that we're going to make mezonot on pasta. We never make hamotzi on pasta. No such thing like that. So, in other words, even if you want to be stringent, like, and say, oh, well, okay, eat it with bread, just to be on the safe side. When it comes to pasta, you don't need that. Why that? Why is that? Because it doesn't look like bread, so therefore it's mezonot for sure. So we're clarifying here very practical stuff, right? So it comes out like this, right? What's a blessing for pancakes? It's always going to be mezonot because it's a batter and it's also sweet, and it's got additional stuff in there. For sure, it's going to be mezonot every time. It'll never be hamopsi, right? Pancakes. What about donuts? Donuts is always going to be mezonot, right? No matter what, according to what we said. So really, the only thing that we can also write pasta always mezonot, right? No matter what, nothing is going to change about that. Okay. So the only thing we really have left to be stringent on, to have a doubt, is regarding a white dough, which is it looks like bread basically, was made instead of making it to the oven with baking, they made it, they fried it in oil and or water. There's sort of a doubt there going on, but the truth is, honestly, we don't really have much today, that fits that category, the description. Except maybe, this thing which they call the bialy, I think, which I don't eat those, I never eat them, but they're like, sold at the bagel stores many times. And I think those are like that, they're boiled in water, and it's like a regular white dough. So there, apparently there will be this doubt would apply over here in that category. Anyway, so let's go through what the Ramah says here. We already covered the issue of pasta. We covered the issue of donuts. That's clear. So what else we got left? Right. So then he brings in the issue of pashtida and krepla. Right. So these are like types of dough, that they make And what he's saying is, right, since they look like bread, they don't really look like pasta. They look more like bread. So therefore, he says the proper thing to do with these is also to be stringent, and eat it together with bread, just to be on the safe side. And then he reiterates what we just said, right, the Rama, which is that all this doubt, right, only applies to a dough which is white. But when it comes to, dough which is mixed in with, right, the sugar and honey and the oil or, milk and things like this, for sure, right, those things are going to be mezonot because of what we already said, because these are like dessert breads or snack breads. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know, right? I think we pretty much described everything well here. Okay. I hope I didn't miss anything. So next, right, piece is going to be talking about, what we mentioned yesterday a little bit, right, regarding bagels, We're going to talk about that right now, So let's get into that. Also very practical, right, for us who like bagels. Let's see what goes on with that. But it seems to me, there are some like, bagels which are sold on the, like in the market, the supermarkets, which are not the real bagels, they're like more like a phony baloney, whatever, right? Some fake stuff there, so they're not really made like the original bagels, the authentic bagels. But anyway, right, let's first get into the basic concept here. We'll talk about that later. So let's go back to Bet Yosef and tour. So it says over here like this. קרסינן בפרק החולץ, it says in גמר יבמות מם עמוד א', גם בחלוט, ואף אגב דחלתה, מקרא כיוון דהדר אפיה בתנור, right? So we're talking about something which was first boiled in water and then placed into the oven, right, afterwards. We call that bread, that's bread. So therefore he says he's going to fulfill his obligation on Passover if he eats that. ונראה דהו הדין שמברכים עליה המוציא. So it's the same thing, we bless המוציא on that, בשלוש ברכות לברכת המזון. מאחר שלא נאמר עליו בשום מקום שלא יברכו עליו המוציא, because it doesn't say anywhere which they shouldn't make המוציא on that, בשלוש ברכות or right, לברכת המזון. Okay, so it's very short, right? So we'll do Shulchan Aruch, and right, that's our bagel halacha, right? For us in our generation, right? Pretty much. So let's see that. So it says here like this, right? Perush charut b'chemin pat chotin oto rotchin. So there's a process like this, where they make bread like this. First they boil it in water, right, for a short amount of time, whatever. And then he puts it in the oven, right? Pat gamuhu, that's like real bread. Nothing to talk about, right? The bagel, right? So therefore the blessing is going to be hamotzi. So says the Rama, "V'chen davar shebelilato raka shapo betanur belo bashke." Oh, so another thing he says, the Rama is, what about if you have something, which you made like a low quantity, low ratio of flour, right? So in other words, it's a batter, right? It's not a dough, and you made that in the oven. In the last halakha we talked that you fried it, right, or you boiled it. Now we're talking about you made it in the oven. So what happens over there? A batter which was made in the oven, right? I guess that would apply to, what we said about these waffles, right? That they make like that, these Eggo waffles, right? That's exactly what they do. They take a batter, right? They put it into the mold, and they put that mold in the oven. They don't fry it. So that's the waffles, exactly, right? What he's talking about here. So what happens with that? So he says, but here's the thing, right? Our waffles are different. Why? Because the waffles that we have, they're sweet, right? So it's like dessert or snack kind of thing. But here he's talking about that he made it, without any sweetness, right? Just like white dough. So he says that would be like bread. So therefore, the blessing would be hamotzi. Also, if we made it into that special pot, right? There's no liquid there, right? It's like made with steam, whatever. ומעט משקה שמושכים בו האילפס, right? And there's like just there's a little bit of fluid there, right? That they baste this pot with, right? They coat the pot. שלא יישרף, in order that it shouldn't get burnt. לא מקרה משקה. So he says that's not really called like liquid. Why? Because it's very little amount. אבל דבר שבלילתו רכה ותגנוב ממשקה, but he says, but if you made something, right, which is like a batter, right, and you also you fried it, right, in some kind of a liquid like oil, he says that's not. Everybody agrees that that's not called bread. Interesting. Okay, I don't have an example for that right now. Like offhand, on my mind that we have today, something like that. I'm not really sure. People who are bakers know better than me about these things, whatever. But I'm not really such a big baking guy. Whatever. But anyway, right. So again, right, to reiterate, what's going on here in this halacha? They're all very practical stuff. Number one, right? Since bagels are made by boiling and then putting in the oven, so therefore the blessing is hamotzi. Right. That's it, right? It's a meal, right? So wash your hands, make hamotzi, and say birkat hamazon, and don't try to get out of it, right? Forget about that, right? Don't play games. Okay, so that's that, right? And then we have the Rama, right, that brings the issue of the waffles, right? But here he's talking about waffles that are made out of white dough, so that will be hamotzi. So what is that? What is that talking about? That you, as we said, right, you made like a batter, and you put it into the oven to bake it. So that would be hamotzi. But as we said again, right, our waffles are not like that, and the reason is because they're sweet, so therefore the blessing is mezonot. But here's the thing, right? According to what we said yesterday, if you have 4 egg sizes, right, of that stuff, and you turn it into a meal, so that would already be hamotzi and red birkat hamazon because you ate the amount that it takes, to make it into a meal. It wasn't yesterday we talked about that. It was the last week, right? Whatever it was, right? Whatever it was the last time we spoke about that, right? About the sweetbreads, about the dessert breads, and all that stuff. So, right, that's the story there. So again, right, if you're making it white with the white dough like that, it would be hamotzi. If you're making it, with something sweet, then it's going to be mezonot, like as we said. So that's that. And then, right, he brings the issue of. Also, if you made it like in a pot or something like that, right? But there's no liquid there basically, right? So then it's like it's the same as making in the oven. Just like the oven has no liquid there, also that pot has no liquid. So therefore, it's going to be also hamotzi and birkat hamazon for that as well. Even though we based it a little bit, with some water or some oil, right? Whatever it is, that's not considered to be really liquid. Why? Because it's a very little amount, just to to make it non-stick. Okay, or it shouldn't burn, right? Another thing. So that's that. And then, right, one more thing. The last thing we mentioned was that if you have a batter and he fried it in oil, right? So we have like deep fry, this kind of thing. So he said that, according to everybody, is not called bread. So therefore, the blessing would be mezonot. I can't offhand think of something that they make like this today. I don't know, whatever. Okay, so use your imagination, right? Whatever it is. So that's the story, right? That's the way it goes. Okay, so I guess we'll stop here, B'ezrat Hashem, So thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. We'll see you, Bezat Hashem, next week, and keep praying for our friend Bruria, who's under the weather. She's having pain and all kinds of stuff. And next week she's going into surgery. So keep her in your prayers, Bezat Hashem, and we'll see you next week. Chazak Baruch. Laila Tov. Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi.
God bless.
God bless.